Well, here I am for my coverage. Highly critical stance towards Israel and Western media, and he's been calling me out for my coverage.
Oh, fuck it, man.
He only cares about Israeli citizens. He does not care about Palestinians as human beings. That's why it's apples to oranges. It's like one side is a human, the other side is a barbaric monster child.
I never said that, obviously. He says that he'd like nothing more than to come on to Uncensored.
No, good, Toshi.
To my face. Well,
I haven't seen this interview, but they've all been good, these ones.
I'm joined by Hassan. Hassan, thank you very much indeed for coming on.
I've seen some of this guy's videos, by the way, Toshi. I'm so used to seeing his face on YouTube. I don't actually like him,
but I'm gonna try
the way he talks about American politics.
To not do my British accent while I'm here.
But on Palestine, he's pretty
coming on. Explain to me why you consider me a stenographer for the Israeli government, given that in the last week, I think more than any other host in the world, I have given lengthy platforms to...
Yeah, you see clips of him whenever he chimes in on something. Culture wars.
No, I do have to commend you. You certainly have had more pro-Palestinian voices than the rest of the British media and certainly the rest of Western media in general. Now, as far as saying that you're a stenographer, I said that journalists are not supposed to be stenographers, and yet when it comes down to it, in most circumstances,
he's basically a YouTuber, Toshi.
We may be in. There are stenographers for
YouTubers are taking over mainstream media news now.
In general, and Israel happens to be.
Nobody wants to hear about media trained
in this ongoing conflict.
Corporate mouthpieces now.
Me a propagandist because I want to play you. This was your reaction to when the hospital got bombed.
I'm a propagandist.
Well, no,
for the record.
I'm not calling you that. I'm just saying. I'm going to play you.
I'm saying I am.
Okay. Well, then I want to.
I'm saying I am.
I just
want to
put
even play it.
Okay. I'm going to play the clip. This is your reaction to the bombing of the hospital.
Toshi, greatness. Where is everyone? It's 5 years.
I was in the process of getting ready for the stream. Israel enacted one of the singular worst strikes they have done thus far, and an Israeli airstrike hit the Al Ahli hospital in Gaza City, where thousands of civilians were seeking medical treatment and shelter from the relentless bombing campaign.
Now, interestingly, when you were saying that, I was coming on air too.
Dude, like, people talk about this like this shit is only happened now. The bombing of hospitals, rockets being sent into Israel, you know, blockades, Hamas not letting people flee, Hamas using people acting like this has been going on for fucking over 20 years. They keep using the term the single most horrific thing. Dude, 60, 70 plus years, fam, of deaths boiled down to one weekend. This is what they do. Why are they acting like it's not been happening all this time? I don't know.
And I took a position based probably on...
It makes it easy on people if they can boil a whole conflict down into one weekend of news.
Of waiting. Of just saying, I think we should just wait and see what has actually happened here, get clarification, see who's actually to blame before we start passing judgment. You raced in to assume, as many people did, by the way, including the New York Times, BBC, mainstream media, and of course most of the Arab world then followed, that this was clearly, indisputably, an Israeli airstrike on this hospital. And yet all the evidence now suggests very strongly that it was.
They're spinning this. This is what they're trying to do. They're saying that Hamas are so dumb and so stupid and so ineffectual and so fucking, like, they haven't been doing this for the last fucking 20, 30 years plus, that one of their rockets accidentally fell on a fucking hospital. And now it's even proved that it didn't even fall on the hospital, it fell on the parking lot. Right? They're trying to make Hamas look like these guys that haven't been defending Palestinians for all this time, because Palestinians have no one but Hamas to defend them. They're trying to make it less about the civilians and the attack on the hospital and more about Hamas's ineptitude and Hamas needs to go. Dude, without Hamas, they have no defense. As long as Israel is illegally occupying Gaza, without Hamas, the Palestinians have zero defense. Zero defense from fucking Israelis are stormtrooper and all of them. First they're saying they're smart enough to do surgical attacks. Now they're saying they're dumb enough to attack their own peeps. Yep.
That in fact this was a rocket that misfired coming from a terrorist group inside Gaza. So my question for you is this: Why would you?
I wouldn't go that far.
Why
Piers.
would you be so certain in what you said before you knew?
Okay, so
Because Israel's done it before.
Before we get started on this conversation, let's understand something very important here. There's no electricity in Gaza. Internet is patchy in Gaza. There's no food in Gaza. There's no water in Gaza. This is all by design. This is because Gaza is under a brutal blockade, a brutal occupation by the Israeli government. Okay?
Dude, like, I don't know how many times someone can remind people. It's like they willfully ignoring that Israel should not be in fucking Gaza. Israel can defend itself if they were in Israel, but they are not in fucking Israel. They're in Gaza. So of course they're gonna get fucking attacked. Get the fuck out of Gaza. Then we talk, fam. You should not be there, Israel. You should not be in fucking Gaza. Imagine in America, MCAS Toshi, in America, if you break down a home, someone's door, and it's a home invasion, they call it a home invasion. The right of someone who's been home invaded is to shotgun the guy. You can shoot a guy dead for a home invasion. If someone invades your property illegally, you shoot them dead. I can't believe Americans are the same one that don't understand this basic fucking concept. That when you are somewhere you should not be, you are a fucking criminal, and you fucking get got, fam. If you want to cry defense on your own fucking lands. People attacking you so you can get the fuck out of their house. Simple. There was a white journalist woman, who made the same metaphor, allegory to what Hijab was saying about imagine someone came up to your house and fucking threw you in the bar. Another woman made the same thing.
There's a role in the fog of war and the misinformation that gets spread.
Yeah, it's the same.
However,
it's the fucking same.
You made it seem as though
I'm maybe not as extreme as Hassan, but it's the same.
100% not an Israeli airstrike.
No, I didn't.
And instead,
I literally just said it's not a certainty.
Okay, sorry.
I said the evidence is
Then
increasingly pointing to this not being an Israeli airstrike, and that is expert evidence from people who have no skin in the game at all.
Yes. Well, I don't know which expert you're talking about, because I think Channel 4 did a pretty good job. As a matter of fact,
yeah, Channel 4 did do a good job. They were boots on the ground.
Probably the best job so far in
Channel 4 did the best.
That the IDF has said. But the reason why
they're a British news channel,
and I still do believe that the likelihood is that this was an Israeli bombing campaign, wasn't only because of the
it's their MO. They've done it before.
Video, the phone video from the balcony.
People are so surprised that Israel would drop bombs on a hospital. They've done it before. Where do you think all those human shield memes have come from? For the last 15 years, where do you think those memes have come from that Israel shares of Hamas hiding underneath hospitals? Where do you think they come from? That's their excuse for bombing hospitals. Israel have done it before. That's their MO. Beheading babies is not part of the modus operandi of fucking Hamas. Otherwise, you would have heard 15 years ago that fucking Hamas were beheading babies. Why now?
Had all of the markings of an airstrike. The fact that the Israeli Air Force was conducting a bombing campaign in the region at the time, according to the Al Jazeera live streaming footage that everyone is using but doesn't understand. The fact that the digital media person for the IDF immediately came out.
Thanks for popping by, Poppy Lang, man.
Actually,
these voices need to be heard, fam. I'm not a fan of Hasanabi though, Poppy Lang. But I rate him for this.
At the end of the day, but this was a Hamas target and celebrated it. And more importantly, I guess, the fact that this hospital had been bombed by Israel. This hospital had been bombed by Israel on Saturday. 22 hospitals have, as a matter of fact, been bombed by Israel since this last saga in the occupation. And this hospital had been bombed directly by Israel, where the cancer ward was destroyed. Israel has been bombing all of these hospitals. Israel has been calling all of these hospitals to evacuate over and over and over again. The medical professionals at the hospital had been called by the Israeli government the day prior, and everyone on the ground assumes that this is an Israeli airstrike.
Yeah, they warned people before they bomb them.
The situation.
Hassan,
So when you have
but the truth is,
can I just finish this?
if you watch the
Can I just finish
BBC, if you watch the BBC account of all this last night, by their Verify unit, which was specifically set up by the BBC to be completely dispassionate in these investigations.
Yeah, exactly. Hamas does not have that capability. They were showing video footage. They don't have the capability for those kind of missiles.
Conclusion, based on circumstantial evidence, I'll make that clear, that this would not have been an Israeli airstrike, including, for example, the size of the crater, which bears no relation to the size of craters normally left by Israeli. So, look, my point is, neither of us know for sure. But you took to your airwaves immediately because actually your, I wouldn't even say unconscious bias, your admitted propagandist bias on your part was that you wanted that to be an Israeli airstrike. It suited your narrative. And I would say that
they're apparently the only people that warn others. They actually pat themselves on the back, saying we warn people before we bomb them. Of course, it's fucking them.
I wanted it to be an
being
Israeli
a stenographer. Well, you know, you accuse me of being a stenographer. I try and be fair and get to the truth. In your case, I don't think you try to do that. I think you appeal to your audience, appeal to your base, and you don't really care whether the facts are there or not.
This is entirely unfair because you just said circumstantial evidence favors that this was not an Israeli airstrike.
Yeah.
I gave you all of the circumstantial evidence that it does favor that
It's a shame.
airstrike. The reason
He's a chameleon.
why, however, circumstantial evidence is not enough.
He's a chameleon.
And one thing that I will concede to.
Do you know, when he was on CNN, he was the most left-wing motherfucker you could see. When he was a CNN mouthpiece, anti-gun, anti-this, as soon as he left CNN and he got fired from Good Morning, all his conservative, right-leaning punditry and talking points came out. All of them came out. He flip-flops. He's like Paul from the fucking Christian Bible. No, not Christian Bible. He's like Paul, basically. He pretends, oh, I'm going to pretend to the Jews I'm a Jew. I'm going to pretend to the Gentiles I'm a Gentile. I'm going to pretend to the pagans I'm a pagan. But secretly I hold these views and those views. He's just a chameleon. He's just one of these fucking chameleons.
Because when more information did come out, and no, I do not mean when Israel said that they did not bomb this hospital and it was actually Hamas, and then they turned around and went, never mind, it's not Hamas, it's actually Islamic Jihad. And then they said, we have more evidence coming out in a couple hours. And then the evidence came out, and it turns out it sounded like the phone conversations that they were able to intercept, supposedly, sounded like, by experts at the very least, to be completely false and completely made up.
Yeah, but Hassan, I don't think...
He hasn't had sleep.
In all honesty...
You can tell Hasanabi hasn't had sleep. He said it was early.
I think you're a smart guy.
Piers, let me finish.
I think you've looked at all of this, and I think in your heart, you know this was probably not an Israeli airstrike. And I'm just curious why you would... Instead of admitting that as factual,
that is not what I'm saying. That is not what I'm saying at all.
I don't understand why you would...
I feel sorry for Hasanabi. He's tired. I can tell he's tired.
You're asking me to be on your show. Do you want to talk?
Yes.
I think he's barely had any sleep.
And I want to be on the show. Thank you so much for having me on your show. Let me explain exactly what I said, and let me explain to you why.
I think his words are on borderlining or slurring because he hasn't had much sleep. Come on.
I think still, to this very moment, until there is a third-party investigation that is concluded by the UN, the International Criminal Court, or specifically a forensic analyst that looks at the situation, is allowed to be on the ground. This is not just my perspective. This is B'Tselem as well, which is an Israeli organization that has also demanded a third-party investigation occur. I am not going to conclusively say that this was not Israel's fault.
I don't expect you to.
Because I just gave
you. He was almost hit his £1 million target.
As far as me being a propagandist goes, everyone is a propagandist. I'm just honest about it. You're a propagandist. We have our biases.
I'm curious who you think I'm a propagandist
I'm at least honest
for.
about my biases.
Israel, he fucking told you. Israel.
Who do I think you're a propagandist for? Whichever every media person is doing propaganda.
But who for? I've got to be
Israel.
doing something.
You think it's a bad word. I don't. That's just the difference. This is a
I
semantics
do. I think it's
conversation
actually quite a
that is
serious charge.
uninteresting.
Hassan, I think it's a serious charge to level, not as a podcaster, but as a journalist who's
Hasanabi needs to
broadcasting
ask him
around the world.
if Piers even acknowledges that Israel illegally occupies Gaza. If you're going to be asked to condemn Hamas for an unprovoked attack, you condemn it, fine. Ask Piers if you even acknowledge that Israel occupies Gaza illegally.
Who has a reputation, I believe, for being fair and impartial, actually, on these issues. It's quite a charge to just say, I'm a stenographer of the Israeli government or I'm a propagandist. I don't think there's any evidence that I'm either of those things. I'm curious who you think I am doing
While
the
we're
propaganda
having this
for.
conversation, 3,000 Piers, while we're having this back and forth, 3,840 Palestinians have been ruthlessly slaughtered in the last incursion into Gaza. I feel like this is an incredibly selfish, self-centered conversation to have. You asked me to be on here. You wanted to hear my perspective. I'm willing to give it to you. I don't want to talk about I don't want to talk about Noam Chomsky style manufacturing consent conversations about how the media is operating at the behest of capital.
You were the guy. Listen, you were the guy that called me.
There are dead people.
Listen, Hassan, I only asked you because you're the guy that called me a propagandist and called me a baboon in a suit. I was curious as to why. You don't want to say who I'm doing the propaganda for. We'll move on. I agree with you. There's a bigger picture here.
Dude,
Hassan, let's take a short break.
He must smoked a blunt or something. He's not his usual self right now. I know Hasanabi enough to know that he's not.
Welcome back, Hassan. Piker is still with me.
He needs to sharpen up a little bit.
A clip of something that you said about the
Get your points across.
October 7th terror attacks, and in particular, the attack at the music festival, which killed 260 people.
Look at this guy. You know what shouldn't happen? Killing 260 people at a music festival. No, you're right, man. That just happened on its own because, bad guys wanted to do bad things. You're right. Dude, if they subjugated you to a open-air prison your whole life, you're going to break out eventually when you realize that there's no other way to get out of it.
I mean, it sounds to me there, Hassan.
Yeah, nervous.
In some way saying they
not everyone could be Mohammed Ajay.
No, I wouldn't say that they had it coming. I think that Michael Brooks used to say, analysis is not justification. And while obviously civilian casualties and horrific barbaric acts that were committed on October 7 are completely unacceptable, the important thing to make sure that it never happens again is to analyze what are the conditions as to how it happened to begin with. And I think Ehud Barak is going to be on in a little bit as well, or maybe he's on.
I remember when Hasanabi got belted by his uncle. The guy from the Young Turks. You know the main guy who's on the Young Turks? Cenk Uyghur. He got belted because I think in one of his streams, Hasanabi said that America deserved 9/11. And he had to apologize. And he actually Cenk went on video and gave him a belting or something. Because he's his uncle, you know what I mean?
And I'm almost certain that while he has...
Yeah, he's related. He's his neat nephew.
And held
that guy's nephew.
This conversation in many key and critical points. I would go so far as to say that he is among many others who also recognize that the Bibi Netanyahu administration is responsible. This is not just my assessment. This is 85% of the Israeli population's assessment at the time. This is years and years and years of refusing to negotiate.
I don't know if his nephew is Christian. I'm not sure.
Don't take my word for
his
it.
uncle's atheist. I think he's atheist.
I would agree again.
In a closed-door conversation with Likud members.
They're secular Turks.
If you want to thwart any kind of Palestinian nation state, you must do everything you can to only negotiate with Hamas. We control how high the fire goes. He has given cash to Hamas by way of Qatar. There is no bigger fan of Hamas than Bibi Netanyahu, which I hope one day you can maybe interview, and then you'll ask him to.
No, I actually did interview him a few months ago, and I did actually spell out to him that there have been a lot more Palestinian deaths this year so far, up to the point of the interview.
Bibi's a right winger. You literally had.
He said then he didn't believe in collective responsibility.
Nick Mencken, not little Nick.
Now this hot phrase.
You had Nick Mencken saying to the Israelis, he is far right. Benjamin Netanyahu and his cabinet are what Trump was to America. Literally, Cunning said that. Cunning's not left or right. He's more like a centrist.
crisis about whether you would hold all people in Gaza responsible for Hamas. Interesting to see if when they...
Can I ask you a
well, let
question?
me just finish my point. If they do then launch a ground invasion, it'd be interesting to see if they keep to that word. You know, I'm not a defender of what Bibi Netanyahu's been doing in Israel. In the last year, his attack on the credibility and integrity of the Supreme Court, I think, has been a disgrace. And I think it has fractured society in Israel. I also think that it's caused so much social unrest and had such big protests that you could argue it's taken the eye off the ball of the people who should have been defending the border because they've been trying to sort out what's been going on domestically, internally inside Israel. So I think it's a catastrophic failure of intelligence, of security, of defense, all of those things. I'll be amazed, frankly, if Netanyahu survives this. So I'm certainly not here to defend him, even if you do view me as a stenographer.
You know what's fucking crazy to me? You know what's crazy to me? We're living in a post-9/11 world where everything is compared to 9/11. Yeah, well, we're going to constantly be reminded of the Holocaust, which is fucked up. We're going to constantly be reminded of the Holocaust. But when it comes to contemporary news, everything will always be compared to 9/11. Even though in 1948, when the Nakba happened, that was singularly the biggest atrocity in the Israel-Palestinian conflict ever. More than now, more than what happened in 9/11. And you got Biden saying 15 9/11s. What was the Nakba? If what happened last weekend was fucking 15 9/11s, what the fuck was the 48 Nakba then? 27.9 fucking 9/11s. But no one wants to take the Palestinian context. It's always gonna come back to comparing atrocities next to Muslim atrocities. But when it comes to genocides and stuff, you're gonna compare it against something incomparable like the Holocaust. You know what I mean? So it diminishes the Palestinian victims. The Nakba was the biggest thing in this particular thing that you can even think of. These people, they've been covering it for 25 fucking years. This news, 25 plus years. They know the facts, but they omit them for this new generation.
My question for you, I think, is this: is that I've had a lot of problems trying to get people on the pro-Palestinian side to separate two things. That you can say, as I believe and you believe, that the Palestinians have been maltreated for decades. That the situation where they are effectively, I mean, I don't even call it an occupation because Israelis aren't in Gaza. They pulled out in 2005, but they still control the ability of Gaza.
This is why I call you a propagandist, Piers.
I'm just saying the phraseology is confusing to me because the reality is Israel exercises control over people in Gaza. It allows them in and out. It allows them to turn on the tap of water and so on and so on. I get all that. They don't actually live there because they can't live side by side with each other.
That's why it's called an open-air prison.
Right. I don't disagree with that.
It's an illegal occupation. They're freaking criminals.
And I've pointed this out for a long time as a journalist. So we don't disagree about the appalling plight of Palestinian people. But the issue comes that if you can't separate that ongoing dispute between Israel and Palestine from the absolutely appalling barbarism of October the 7th, which was on a whole different scale to anything we've seen.
No, it wasn't.
100 people, Holocaust survivors, babies in their cribs, young women taken, tortured, abused, shot, beheaded, it was reported, and so on. If we can't look at that collectively, with a general humanity and agreement that is an absolute atrocity, then there's something wrong with this. And I find
it's an atrocity. Now what?
On both sides is now.
MCAS, Toshi, it's an atrocity. Now what? I agree. Killing men, women, children, non-combatants, atrocity. Now what? Now what? Now that I've condoned it, now what? How does that help? Tell me, how does it help the Israeli civilians? How does it even help this conflict? Condone it. UN condones shit. Condones and condemns, sorry. UN condemns shit. Why has that done? What that done in fucking 30 years? What has even UN level condemnation done in 30 years? Nothing. So fuck the condemnation, fuck the platitudes and equivocating. Look, what can Israel do? What can Palestine do? Palestine can't do nothing. Hamas are a symptom. They're like a symptom of a disease. and the disease is Israel's occupation of thing. The Hamas aren't perfect, but Hamas are a symptom of a disease, and the disease is Israel being a thing. Israel, honor your treaties, your agreements, go back to your 67 borders. It will de-escalate. Look how quickly it will de-escalate.
So toxic and so frenzied that you get people who literally can't. We've had a bunch of actors, right, signing this statement saying they want a ceasefire in Gaza and calling Israel war criminals and so on. But they don't say a word about the Hamas attacks.
Oh, fuck off, man.
And I find that
But you
really
agree with
hard,
them, right?
really hard to accept.
But do you agree with them? If they had said, for example, that October 7 attacks were brutal and massacres occurred, and then they said everything else, that Israel is committing war crimes, would you agree with them?
Okay. Here's
He
what I
can't
would
say
also
it.
say about that.
He can't
Is
say it.
Israel not allowed to defend itself?
Here we go. It's back to, is Israel not allowed to do it? He won't say that Israel is illegally occupied. He won't say it. It's like he cannot bring himself to say something so obvious. The UN, international, everyone says that Israel, he can't say it. He always brings back to, can they defend themselves? He didn't answer the question.
From the worst terror attack we've seen since 9/11. Is it not allowed to defend itself
just odd.
after
You said you're not a
1,400 people in Israel
propagandist.
are butchered in that way? And the question then, if you assume that they are able to defend themselves, as any
Piers,
free
that is
democratic country,
that is the
then the
Israeli
question
State
becomes,
Department line.
Hassan,
That
let
is
me-
the IDF's line. That is
Hassan,
the line that everyone
Hassan,
has
let me ask you
channeled.
this. It then becomes a question of how can they defend themselves if their mission.
No, here we
is to
go.
get rid of Hamas.
Proportionality thing. He just asked him, Hasanabi just asked him if they had condemned it and said all those things, that Israel are war criminals, they occupy Gaza illegally, would you agree with them? He says, yes, but what about their right to defend? He didn't answer the fucking question. People are getting tired of this fucking shtick.
Terror organization that's committed one of the worst acts of terror ever seen, if that is their stated aim, then what they are doing is consistent with that, isn't it?
No. Here's why this is actually an abject failure, and this is not just my perspective on the matter. I'm just a dumb idiot with a Twitch stream who is live reacting to the news and trying to make sense of everything as it's
Dude, we
ongoing.
kill these
Usually I have a
fucking
policy of
journalists.
not covering breaking
Even
news,
Hasanabi, who I'm not a fan of, he
sometimes
fucking
that policy
kills
is
Piers.
violated. But ultimately, I am not held up by the same journalistic standards, even though I think I do a much better job.
He's passionate for the fucking truth, at least.
Outlets in general. So let me just say this really quickly. You said Israel has a right to defend itself. Absolutely zero people think that this is a ridiculous statement. However, how Israel is defending itself is collective punishment. Now, collective punishment in the form of depriving 2.2 million people of electricity, collective punishment in the form of depriving them of water, of food, collective.
At the end of 2020,
This motherfucker. This Farage needs to get in another plane crash, I swear. Hope he gets another plane crash, fucking Farage.
Punishment of in the form of 51 people dying in the West Bank, where there is no Hamas in the West Bank, and yet 51 people have died because in the West Bank, settlers that are occupying Palestinian
He was in a plane
territory
crash.
in violation of
He looked like a fucking
international
idiot
law,
when he came out of it.
settlers who are doing an act of colonial terrorism, and this is not my statement on it, this is international law, that are doing horrifying things by simply just existing
Hold
there
it down.
and maintaining the presence with an occupying force in the form of IDF, who is ritualistically humiliating Palestinians in a structure that B'Tselem, an Israeli organization, calls the permit regime, where every waking moment of Palestinians' lives in the West Bank are absolute hell.
B'Tselem, humanitarian organization.
51 Palestinians have died, and that was before the Ramallah protest that happened last night, and the Israeli forces were opening up with live fire on protesters last night. So who knows what that death toll has become? This is all a product of Israel being an apartheid state. This is a violent apartheid state. There is no way to be a peaceful
all right, Hassan,
apartheid
let me ask you
state.
this.
Let me tell you, by the way, guys, there are people that are going to tell you that Hamas aren't down with a two-state solution. They're not down with a two-state solution. They're going to say, go to their charter, right? Go to the Hamas charter. Even a fucking dickhead like Apostate Prophet and David Wood, people who hate Palestinians, they literally cited 2017 charter for Hamas, where Hamas were totally down. They go, look, we are going to be down if Israel goes back to its 67 borders. That's Palestine's job done. Hamas and Palestine's job done. They're like, look, we will be cool if you agree to your 67, go back to 67 borders. So anyone that tells you Hamas isn't down for a two-state solution, even its detractors and enemies citing sources that they are in fact down for a two-state solution.
Violence.
Let
it
me
is a
ask you
violence
this then.
required for its maintenance.
Okay, listen.
And that violence is frustrating people.
I hear
that
you.
violence
I
is
hear you.
radicalizing people.
But here's
Hold
my-
on.
I hear
as
you.
far as Israel, as far as what Benjamin Netanyahu has done, as far as the war government, what they have done, Piers, going into Gaza
Yeah.
and bombing Gaza and killing 3,480 Palestinians so far in Gaza, 1,000 plus children out of all of those casualties, 22 hospitals being bombed, a bakery, the only remaining intact bakery being bombed yesterday.
They hate Muslims. I'm sorry. They won't say it, but they hate Muslims.
Are horrifying and unjustifiable when
The Christians and the Jews are allies to one another. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wasn't lying to us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was not lying to us. He said the Christians and Jews are allies to one another. The Christians want Christ to come back. I keep reminding people, white Christian evangelicals want Christ to come from the clouds, set foot on the temple. And they need all of Israel. They need the Jews to build the temple again so that Christ can come back. This is why they support them. This is why Biden says he's a Zionist. Conservatives call themselves Zionists.
When Israel does it, Israel has a right to defend itself. This is identical to the same talking points that I've heard from every Israeli administration official. It's the same talking points that I've heard from American politicians championing the exact same talking points. It's the same thing that I've heard
Right
from
to
everyone else in the
defend.
media. You might have been against the Iraq war, and you use that, but you're using that for evil, in my opinion, at this point. If you are not sitting here and condemning those acts of war crimes, those acts of violence, those acts of collective punishment.
Well, I would say to that,
He's not
I think
condemned them.
any child in this conflict is horrific, absolutely horrific. But the question comes down to me that after an act of terror, as we saw on October the 7th, Israel should be able to defend itself and should be able to go after the people that perpetrated that, who live amongst civilians in Gaza deliberately. And the question for me becomes down
They
to
have no choice but to live among them. They are of them.
I don't know what that answer
Dude,
is.
Hamas is made up of victims. Hamas is made up of generational victims of Israel, guys. A boy who had his mom and dad blown to pieces by Israel has now grown up to join Hamas. What part of this don't they fucking understand? Hamas is made up of the victims. I keep telling people, they would be reporting in the news if Hezbollah was shipping in boys and men to fight this fight, but they're not. They're trying to make that link and they're trying to call everyone ISIS, but they're not. Hamas is made up of the victims, generational victims of this fucking 60, 70-year conflict.
I do know the answer to that. Last night I had Dr. Ofer Kassif, an Israeli Knesset member who was expelled, suspended for 45 days for saying what I believe is the truth. Championing the exact same position of the Haaretz's editorial board. There are a lot of thoughtful people, a lot of formative Holocaust scholars, a lot of historians that all agree on the same point. The reason why violence that even penetrates through the Israeli security blanket that people thought existed, that penetrated through that Iron Dome, the Iron Wall, if you want to call it that, is because of years and years of oppression and years of violence, which is a necessity to maintain an apartheid state. And this has to stop.
They want to emasculate Palestine. Imagine the police and the authorities and the courts knew you were a woman that was getting beaten by a husband. Imagine. And in broad daylight, you were getting beaten by your husband. All the witnesses saw. And then they started saying, oh, but you did this and you did that, even though you've been beaten in public by your fucking husband. Or beaten in public by your partner, by your male partner. It's so fucking unfair. You're emasculating the Palestinian people from defending their way of life. You're making it about Hezbollah. You're making it about jihadism. You're making it about ISIS. Hezbollah aren't ISIS. Hamas aren't ISIS. Mujahideen aren't ISIS. Taliban aren't ISIS. These are different fucking groups fighting for different fucking reasons. They're not the same. I said on Twitter, they want to turn any Muslim group, not just the bad ones. They want to turn any Muslim group fighting against oppression into G.I. Joe Cobra Commander, fam. Cobra or Hydra. This nebulous red and black fascist Cobra Command, Hydra. They want to turn into that, so they were all lumped in. You can't fight back. They're gonna be calling the Shias fighting against Sunni rule, like was happening in Iraq, ISIS eventually. Even though they use the Sunni insurgents and militants to fight back, they back the Sunnis. But they will call them, believe me, they will call them ISIS eventually. It's so fucking stupid.
Two ways out of this. Either you engage in full-blown ethnic cleansing, and if you listen to the likes of Smotrich, or if you listen to the likes of Itamar Ben-Gvir, and these very unfavorable, unpopular, far-right figures, if you listen to Netanyahu and his Likud government, they say that they are interested in going in that direction, the ethnic cleansing direction, the ethnic displacement direction.
Did you guys see the Piers Morgan retweet? Piers Morgan tweeted a interview he did with Carter. Jimmy Carter, or one of the presidents, I can't remember. And Carter said that Benjamin Netanyahu wants a one-state solution. He doesn't want a two-state solution. He wants all of Palestine. Benjamin said that. And Piers Morgan retweeted that interview, or tweeted that interview today in the last 12 hours, 24 hours. Even he knows, but he ain't allowed to say. He called it a very prescient interview that even I forgot about. You don't forget nothing. This fucking nigga was in... He's my homie. This guy said that the British government assassinated Diana. That documentary's been banned, but I have a clip of it on my second channel. He sat there speaking to a British actor called Keith Allen. A British guy called Keith Allen in a documentary, right? That was funded by Mohammed Al-Fayed, and he sat there and he said that the British government assassinated Diana. And then he quoted Diana's letters to him and said, as Diana used to say to me, I was trouble to them. As she told me, I'm trouble to them. And if there was any time for them to do something about her, the British establishment was there. He said that, and he's glad that that documentary has been fucking banned. Believe me, Morgan said a lot of things that he wishes people fucking forget, but I don't forget.
Or the only way out of this for a real solution is to move towards peace, to genuinely end the blockade, to end the apartheid, to end the occupation, and create a pathway towards citizenship for all people with a right to return, for all 14 million Palestinians, 5 million of which live under Israeli occupation. It's brutal. And then the rest living in diaspora. These are not unreasonable requests. These are requests that understand the dignity and the humanity of one side and does not simply treat them as their colonial subjects.
Hassan,
and it's the only way to create permanent security and prosperity in the region.
If it was as simple as that, I'm sure that would have happened already. I would say this. I agree with a lot of what you've just said. Not all of it, a lot of it. I don't think you can ever achieve peace now with Hamas controlling Gaza. I don't think you can achieve peace with Netanyahu in charge of Israel, actually, after this. I don't think his own people will want him to be in charge of Israel down the line when they examine exactly how this happened. But we will see. But Hassan, I've got to leave it there. Look, it's good to talk to you.
That's close.
Influential
she
voice
condemned
of people.
Netanyahu without saying Israel.
We have a lot of common ground, and there are some things that we disagree about. But I suspect it's not as much as you think. You know, I do think that the core problem here has got to get resolved in a way that's been completely ignored for decades. And until it gets resolved, until the plight of the Palestinian people is resolved, until all these young people in Palestine feel there's some sense of hope and they can get out of what effectively is, as you say, a prison camp, then nothing is going to change. I don't think it justifies
Let me just say,
I've got to finish it, but I don't think it justifies in any way what happened on October the 7th. But I do agree with you. And
He's
until
tired,
that
man.
core problem gets
Hasanabi's
resolved,
tired.
it will never be
I
peace.
feel bad.
Hassan, I appreciate you joining me. Thank you very much.
I know
Thank you for having me.
I know Hasanabi through reputation, and I know he's a lot more inflammatory, a lot more vigor. He's a lot more sharp than this. They got him when he was really tired. So he was a little bit emotional, and it's fair, man. I rate Hasanabi for this. I'm not a big fan of Senk, his uncle. I don't like the Young Turks. I don't like the secular, sort of anti-religious stance that Young Turks take. But Hasanabi is I know he's a lot more. He's like a fire starter. Him and Hijab are actually quite similar. Yeah, they got him early. They gave him a time where he knew he wouldn't be on top, but he bought the points. He bought all the right points. The hope is that the people, that the pro-Palestinian, I don't think even calling it pro-Palestinian, like there's two sides. The Palestinians are the victims, right? The more people he brings on, I hope it changes Piers' view. His viewers' views will change, undoubtedly, but I think Piers' own line needs to shift. It's too much on the side of Israel. He gives them too much benefit of the doubt. They are a terrorist state by all definition. Got him at his weakest, yeah. He's had so many compelling arguments. People telling him that you've been covering this news for the last 30 freaking years, you know. And then now you've got Piers saying, I forgot my own interviews. So now he needs to brush up on the history. He's brushing up on all the coverage that he's done, you know. I don't blame him. It's hard to remember what happened 2 years ago, let alone 7, 8, 9, 10. But I hope this shifts Piers Morgan in that direction, and he understands that Israel needs to fucking move back to 67 borders. Yep. Flip-flopping, man. There were lots of viewers here, but they didn't want to say nothing. They don't want to say nothing. I don't like fence-saying people. Equivocating and fucking using vague language and neutral. That's got nowhere. 17 years using that kind of it's bad on both sides has done nothing. Done nothing. Done nothing. Who cares what white man billionaires believe? Yeah, because if he believes it, then people will change. Like, he's got a big following, like 6 million people watch the hijab alone. Just that interview got 6 million in 2 days? That's fucking crazy. It's a platform. It ain't about most of these platforms to get the truth out are run by white man, millionaire, billionaire. Not gonna help the casualties. How? He loses his job. At least he fucking stood for something if he loses his job. Stand for something. Have it be like that fucking reviewer from GameSpot who refused to take money. Refused to take money from Square Enix for the... You give it a 10 out of 10 review. Jeff Gerstmann or something. He's allowing people to speak. Yeah. I think that says enough, but we'll see, man. It doesn't feel like a robot though every time. It doesn't feel like he's learning from this. It doesn't feel like Piers is learning. Alright, I'll quickly watch that. Hold on. Please tell me it's not the Halo 2 thing. I've played Halo. I've played the whole series. MCAS. Okay, I'm gonna snooze. I can snooze these ads. Thank God. At least they give me that. I've snoozed it for 5 minutes, so you won't see ads. Oh, come on. I knew it was fucking Halo, man.
Do not disobey your orders.